All right. Our most controversial part of our service is in the news. How do I know that? Because I get all the cards and letters and emails. So it's our most controversial service. One person sent this week, I think, and they said, this is not biblical, this is political. Let me just respond to that. This is not political, this is biblical. And you have to be able to talk about the current social atmosphere in America. We have to be able to talk about that. If we don't, you'll have people like Buttigieg giving us his version of the Bible. We need to be informed. Somebody say amen. So this is right down the line through prophecy. Let me tell you some of the headlines. This one came out today. It said, no place to hide. DHS new heart database uses scars, tattoos, and voice IDs. Forget facial recognition. They're now using your scars, your tattoos, and your voice to ID you. And again, I've been telling you about this over and over again. We've been talking about our identities and how they are searching so many different databases and trying to number everyone really on the planet. And why do I keep telling you that? Because we're getting so further down the line, and sooner or later a government's going to take this over, and they're going to be able to pinpoint anyone they want. So when the Bible says you can't buy or sell except you have the mark, they're going to know exactly who has a mark. They're going to know exactly who doesn't, because most of us are being tracked whether we know it or not. Listen to this. These days you can't really go anywhere without encountering cameras. Going into a store, chances are there's security cameras. Getting money on an ATM, more cameras. Driving through the streets of a city, more cameras still. Your neighbors may have those doorbells from Amazon that are surveilling the entire neighborhood. And many of these cameras are tied to facial recognition databases, or the footage can be quite easily compared there if authorities are looking for someone. So the caveat here is that they're trying to say they're going to protect us from anybody who is a deviant or anybody who is a criminal. But in the meantime, the big net sweeps everybody in the identity system. But as it turns out, it isn't just facial recognition we have to worry about anymore. DHS has a new recognition system called HART, Homeland Advanced Recognition Technology. It's the alarming new identity system being put in place by the Department of Homeland Security. DHS is retiring its old system that was based on facial recognition. Now that was the cutting edge. Facial recognition was the cutting edge. They had points. They can pick you out in a crowd. They have one system that can actually pick you out in a crowd of 100,000 people in a stadium. In a second, they can pick out someone because of facial recognition. Now that technology is absolutely being obsolete. Listen, it's being replaced with HART, a cloud-based system that holds information about the identities of hundreds of millions of people. The new cloud-based platform is expected to bring increased accuracy to the department's biometric operations. It will also allow the agency to look beyond the 3 types of biometric data it uses today: face, iris, and fingerprint, to identify people through a variety of other characteristics like palm prints, scars, tattoos, physical markings, and even their voices. Incidentally, the cloud hosting for HART is being done by none other than Amazon, one of the largest companies on the planet. They're the ones with surveillance devices like the Ring doorbell, and Alexa Home Assistant, and the Nest Home Security System. So does anyone see a pattern here? Also note that Amazon Web Services also hosts data for the CIA, the DoD, and NASA. As HART becomes more established, the old saying, "You can run, but you can't hide," is going to seem even more true. The DHS is delighted at how much further the new system can take them into surveilling Americans. So we realize that this is happening right now. And if you haven't figured it out yet, even your iPhone, your smart TV is listening to you 24/7. Cheryl, I forgot what Cheryl was saying the other day. What were you talking about, Cheryl? And oh, she lost her remote for her car, and we were talking about it, how she wanted to find her remote. And for the first time ever, right after we got talking about it, on her phone, her iPhone, came up about buying replacement remotes. Because they can listen at anything they want. And what they do, companies, is they'll stalk people in rooms just to listen for keywords. So what they did is they listened to a keyword and they found a remote. That company's probably selling remotes, so all their people were listening for that word. Once they do that, they can actually access where her phone is, and they can give her an advertisement, which they did. So think about that. When you're speaking in your home and you have an iPhone or a smart TV, they are listening. So if you say something that's a catchword, now why would they do that? Because they're looking to get someone who's a criminal. They're looking for bomb. They're looking for those. That's how it started. But now it's gotten so big, we have advertisers hiring hundreds of people to listen to millions of calls all over the United States so they can market you. So that should give you a little bit of a chill down your spine when you think of something like that. Let me give you a little bit more about what's going on. So This says, U.S. decline could be sudden. Many people in America and abroad see the country's moral and political decline. The U.S. president at least partially acknowledged this fact with his Make America Great Again slogan. You don't need it to become great again if you've already great or unless you see the country is in decline. This catchy slogan looks back to what many view as a better time. While many hope and believe that the United States can become great again, writer and businessman Jeff Thompson recently made a compelling case from history that says once a nation goes into decline, it never comes out of it. It continues to go in. He observes that empires that deteriorate never regain their previous status, noting that historically it never occurs. Empires fall with alarming speed because the support system that made them possible have decamped and have become reinvigorated elsewhere. Mr. Thomas ended his article with a powerful observation about America's ongoing decline. He says it's all shaping up to be a world-class disaster, one unlike anything we've ever seen before. Now, I understand, just like you do, that a revival can hit America. But let me tell you something. I'm listening to the news. I'm speaking about the news. It's going all over the world. It's going all over the United States. And I'm getting people agreeing with me everywhere. This is not your dad's America. Somebody say amen. Something's happening really bad in America. So it says, Jeremiah wrote, for the plunder will suddenly come upon us, and the destruction upon destruction is cried, for the whole land is plundered. Suddenly my tents are plundered, and my curtains in a moment. Isaiah records a similar prophecy to our rebellious children of Israel. Therefore this iniquity shall be unto you like a breach, ready to fall, a bulge in a high wall, whose breaking comes suddenly and in an instant. That's Isaiah chapter 30. So we're watching signs in America, and we're watching it happen pretty quickly. Let me tell you a little bit about Israel. Another dot on the prophetic connect the dots. Israel's definitely something that we need to pay attention to. These were massive crowds 2 days ago at the Western Wall in Yom Kippur. I want to show you the crowds. These are Jews, some of them from the homeland, some of them traveling there from all over the world. This is an amazing sight. If you've ever been to the Western Wall, it used to be called the Wailing Wall. Before 1967, when the Jews could not access it, and it was in Jordan's control, it was a Wailing Wall because they cried to get to it. It's no longer called that by the Jews. It's called the Western Wall. Right above that wall and over is the Dome of the Rock, to the left a little bit. That is also, right by the Dome of the Rock is Shrine of the Holy Spirit, and that is believed to be the spot where the Ark of the Covenant had rested in Solomon's temple. Jews from all over the world believe that their prayers from there's a hole in heaven, and their prayers from there go straight up to God. And so people take little pieces of paper, they write their prayer requests out, and they stick them in the little cracks. Millions of pieces of paper. Some of your names are in there because I've taken them there. So does God hear only in that spot? Of course not. But it is a holy spot on the earth. And let me tell you something, the Jews massed up to get in there on Yom Kippur. So this came out also in the same week. It says, Awake Jerusalem. Thousands of Christians gather to pray for Jerusalem. Eagles Wing, a nonprofit New York-based evangelical movement, hosted a global day of prayer for the peace of Jerusalem on Sunday, bringing together 70 millennial pastors from the United States, Canada, and Brazil to Israel, many for their very first time along with their followers. Additionally, more than 500,000 evangelical Christian churches worldwide tuned in as God TV broadcasted the event to more than 260 million homes globally. The day of prayer concluded the Awake Jerusalem event, a 3-day gathering where hundreds of Christians from more than 10 nations came together to pray. Most of the pastors had never been to Israel. I think it's a shame that a pastor doesn't go to Israel, because I don't think you can preach the word unless you know know the culture that was there. You can preach the word, but you're missing something. There's an avenue missing. By the way, it was documented before their visit on social media to their combined 35 million followers. And I pray that holds true, because American churches today are denying Israel. They're looking at replacement theology. They're going back to the Old Testament, and there's even some pastors in some large churches that they're doing this. They're going back to the Old Testament. Every time a blessing is for Israel, they say that's now a blessing for us. That is not true. God has blessings to Israel. He has blessings to us. So you can't replace it. Israel is the vine we came from, and you don't go against it. We're adopted in, but that vine's going to grow back again, and you'll hear about that later on in our service tonight. It's talking about Israel. I've been teaching this for a long, long time. When Joseph gave his prophecies to his 12 children, he told them certain things in that prophecy. He would tell them about what would happen, a prophecy to them on his dying bed. So he talks to Asher, one of his children, one of the 12 tribes, and he says, and of Asher, I'm quoting this is in Deuteronomy 33, by the way, 24, and of Asher he said, let Asher be blessed with his children, and let him dip his foot in oil. So about 25 years ago, when I started teaching about Revelation, I started talking about about this, and I said, listen, I know where Asher is. He was given, all the tribes were given a little area of Israel, and I said, they're going to find oil in that area. Well, this is what happened. They have struck oil, one of the largest conglomerations of oil in Israel, and this is where it is. There's Asher. It's in the Golan Heights. There's Asher. They struck it all across here, the Golan Heights. Now, the Golan Heights is also shared by Lebanon here and Syria here. So they've struck it. They've been digging for it and drilling for it for about 10 years now. And so everyone knew that it was there. Geologists told us, they brought up samples. They knew it was there. They just never struck the mother lode. But now they did. So listen to this, and then I'll talk a little bit politically because it goes hand in hand with it. Hook in their jaws. Right now, as you read this, Russia, Iran, and China are waging war within the nation of Syria. On the surface, it's to defeat ISIS and to prevent World War III. But could the real reason why Russia is suddenly so concerned about stopping the Islamic State be a massive deposit of oil discovered in Israel and estimated to be worth in the tens of billions of dollars? Let me give you a little history. Russia has no energy. It took over the Crimea so it can get its natural gas. It has to import all of its oil. Unlike us, who are now oil independent, they have to import it all. And so this is a reason why Russia could be there. I actually believe it's the reason why they're in Syria. When something doesn't make sense, always follow the money. Has Russia promised to share the wealth with their new allies for help in taking the oil from Israel? According to the Russian Times today, the Israeli presence in the Golan Heights is in dispute. The Russian Times put that out. The region is internationally recognized Syrian territory that has been occupied by Israel since 1967, Six-Day War between Israel and several Arab states. So here's the deal with the Golan Heights. The Golan Heights is right here. I've been to it many times. It's right up here. The Golan Heights, about 20 miles in, used to be Syria. Syria, when they attacked Israel in the Six-Day War, Israel gained that land, and so now Israel has it. So Syria is saying, well, that's not really theirs. Jordan's saying it's not really theirs, but Israel occupies it. This is the area where all this massive oil has been found. So reportedly, the potential production may reach billions of barrels. While Israel consumes only 270,000 barrels per day, Israel currently imports up to 3/4 of its oil from the semi-autonomous Kurdish region in Iraq, the Financial Times reported in August. So we're talking about a strata which is 350 meters thick, and what is important is the thickness and the porosity. On average in the world, stratas are only 20 to 30 meters thick. So this is 10 times as large as any strata we know. So we're talking about significant quantities. The important thing is to know that the oil is on the rock, and that's where what we now know. So they've gone to bedrock and they found the oil. The discovery coincides with civil war raging in Syria right now. The Israelis' Golan Heights also borders against Syrian territory controlled by anti-governmental rebels. Israel has reportedly provided medical aid to the rebels and has responded to rocket fire from rebel-controlled territory by striking Syrian army posts. So that's amazing. As the other shoe drops, we now see the real reason for the excitement and activity taking place in Syria. Russia has declared themselves to be the liberator and protector of Syria. They have an ulterior motive. They want that oil. The next step will be to advance on the Syrian heights and reclaim the Syrian land that they think is Syrian for Syria, and Russia take control. And that ties us back to Ezekiel 38 and 39, the Gog and Magog war, when they amass, Turkey, Russia, and Iran amass on the Israeli northern border. That's a war coming. It doesn't have to happen during the tribulation. It can happen today. That's a war coming, and that's already taking shape. Turkey, who has never been a partner of Russia, they are part of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, formed after World War II. The reason it was formed is because of Russian aggression. The nations of Europe, and I've told you this before, the nations of Europe got together, including the United States, and they formed NATO to prevent the Russians from gobbling up countries in Europe. Well, now Turkey is a member of NATO. They're an ally of ours. We have intercontinental ballistic missiles in Izmir, Turkey, which is the Old Testament, which is New Testament Smyrna, and so they're an ally of ours. But Erdogan, the president of Turkey, is really Islamic and pro-Islamic. I'll tell you another article that comes on with him a little later. And so he's sending his troops right now, and he has a military joint exercises and conferences with Iran and Russia. fulfilling Ezekiel. This hasn't been done in 3,700 years. So until people tell me they don't think we're in the last days, they have no idea of history, they have no idea of prophecy, and they have no idea of their current headlines that are making the world. You still with me tonight? Yeah. All right, let me give you a couple more. So as this happens, I'm a member of BAR, Biblical Archaeology Review. The archaeologists are extremely smart. They know the Greek, they know the Hebrew, they know the Bible in and out. But they don't believe in Jesus as a son of God. They believe him as a historical person, and they pretty much doubt almost everything that's in the Bible. But recently, very recently, it's been happening years after years, decade after decade, but it's stepping up right now. They're finding things in the dirt that's proving the Bible. Listen to it. The biblical Edom is unearthed, not a myth, a historical reality. In Psalm 60, the psalmist describes the totality of God's victory over Israel's foes, proclaiming, "Moab is my wash basin, upon Edom I cast my sandal." This is only one of more than 100 mentions of Edom in the Old Testament. The Edomites were descendants of Esau. Esau, remember, sold his birthright to his brother Jacob for a bowl of pottage. Esau means red. His descendants are called Edomites. Over the years, many scholars doubted the Edomites even existed, at least as described in those biblical accounts. They regarded the Edomite kingdom to be largely mythical. Well, the scholars were mistaken. Recently, a team excavating Israel's Timnah Valley found evidence of a thriving and wealthy society dating back to the 12th century before Christ. What kind of evidence? An extensive network of ancient copper smelting facilities were found in the parts of Israel and Jordan that the Bible associates with Edom. So scholars said, well, if there were any Edomites, they were just little tiny villages. They really didn't have a society. When you have smelting processes, this means it was an empire. According to Ben Joseph, these new findings contradict the view of many archaeologists that the region associated with biblical Edom was populated, Edom, by a loose alliance of tribes. Instead, it's consistent with the biblical story that there was an Edomite kingdom here. There it is again, consistent with the biblical story. That phrase seems to pop up a lot in the world of archaeology these days. For example, the excavations at Ashkelon that confirm the biblical account of the Philistines findings on Mount Zion confirming the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem. Not just that it happened, but also when it happened and on and on. You'd think that the sheer number of findings in recent decades that are consistent with the biblical story would soften the systemic scholarly skepticism toward the Bible. It shouldn't, but it hasn't. It should, but it hasn't. One reason some scholars remain stubbornly skeptical is that most archaeologists and social scientists see Judaism and Christianity in the same way they see every other religion, an approach that obscures important distinctions. But what they are finding in the dirt is upsetting their prejudiced views of what the Bible states as fact. Here's my rule of thumb. If the Bible says it, I believe it. It's God's word. It cannot lie. If it's written in the Bible, I'll believe it till I die. All right, here you go. Let me go a little bit further and tell you a little bit about the economy. Actually, I'm going to give you this one. Hold on. I have these out of order because I just stuck another one in today. But I wanted to make sure, it's right over here. So let me get that one first. Let me tell you a little bit about the economy. This came out just today, and I picked it up and wanted to read it to you. It says, we are $22.5 trillion in debt. Now, we can't wrap our head around that. It's too big of a number. So I'm going to give you a couple stats that has to do with this. In order to pay down our national debt, you would have to combine the GDP, gross domestic product, everything they make and sell, of China, Japan, and India. The United States owes $68,400 per citizen. United States owes $183,000 per taxpayer. United States currently has $125 trillion, yes, trillion, in unfunded liabilities. Man, if that was your budget, you'd be pulling your hair out. $125 trillion in unfunded liabilities. That's what they owe. The U.S. debt held by the public will reach 100% of our gross domestic product. That's never happened. That means everything we produce will have to go to servicing our debt. It's never happened. They'll reach that in 2028. And let me tell you, that's a game over type of thing, because we won't be able to do anything then. In 2008, interest on the federal debt was $253 billion. Interest for fiscal year 2019 is 89% higher. For 2019, interest alone, not paying it back, interest alone in the federal debt was $479 billion. In 1979, the total federal government receipts was $463 billion. So that's where you see the deficit. We are giving out, we are owing more than we're taking in, than the taxes are taking in. By the year 2000, the federal debt was $5.6 trillion, $6.7 trillion. In 2019, federal debt is 297% higher. The old deal cost about $50 billion from 1933 to 1940, whereas the future cost of the New Deal, Roosevelt, program still in effect is reckoned at more than $50 trillion. So from $50 billion to $50 trillion. The federal budget deficit. Deficit, again, is the difference between federal outlays and revenues, taxes and things that they owe, will grow to $1 trillion alone in 2020. As of December 2018, only 10 countries in the world have worse debt to GDP ratios than the United States. At NPR, Daniel Kurtzenblin writes that Senator Bernie Sanders' taxation and spending plans would, he's a socialist, he wants to give everything away, would together add $18 more trillion to the national debt. There's no way. We can't pay $22 trillion, let alone $40 trillion. Roughly 24% of federal spending, 24% goes to Social Security, 26% to federal health insurance programs, 9% to safety net programs, and only 2% on transportation infrastructure. We are crumbling at the seams in all of our roads. By 2025, the cost of servicing our national debt will exceed the cost of our military spending. That's one of our highest spendings. And lastly, the cost of implementing a universal basic income. Presidential candidate, Democratic candidate, I may add, Andrew Yang, says that he wants to give $1,000 back to every single American individual every month. He wants to give everyone a check for $1,000. That's wonderful. I had a guy call me who supports Mark Correll Ministries. I don't know him. He called me. I know him because he supports Mark. I have never met him, but I know him. And he said, that sounds really, and he was honest. He said, that sounds really good, Pastor Mark. I've been listening to you for a while. What's wrong with that? And I said, here's what's wrong with it. Someone has to pay for that. That doesn't just, you don't just make that, it's going to have to be paid for. So his central program proposal would cost $3.8 trillion per year, or 85% of current federal spending. We are in trouble. America is in trouble, and nobody's willing to say it. We are in trouble. I've told this over and over again. If a crash comes, most people are not going to be able to survive that crash. So the thing you need to do, and it looks like it's imminent that it's coming, the thing you need to do is get out of debt. Get out of debt as quickly as you can. I meet with people all the time to try to get their balances and their finances right. Here's the way you do it. Number one, get that credit card that has the highest interest, like 17.9%, that you're not paying off every month. Credit card companies are actually banks. They want you to spend as much as you can so they can collect the interest when you can't pay it. 17%, you're getting 0.001% on your savings. Get the biggest ones, pay them off, and then keep going on that. You have to make that an issue because Americans' eyes are bigger than their stomachs. We see something, we want it, we can get it. I mean, how many of you have gotten the letters saying you have $25,000 credit limit? And that's ridiculous. And you get it for 5 different credit cards. If you took those all out max, you're going to be in the doghouse sooner or later. So it's happening, and it's going to happen really, really quick when it happens. Give you a little bit about war, one of the most controversial things that's happening in our news today. Leaving Syria, a blow to U.S. deterrence. So how many of you listened to President Trump speak yesterday? Okay, here's what happened. So he withdraws our troops from Syria. The Kurds are in northern Syria. The Kurds are Islamic. The Kurds are ones that were our allies. They fought with us to help eradicate ISIS. They in Kurdish areas, because they have no country, there are 50 million people. They have no country, and that's because of World War II, by the way. After World War II, the Kurds, we should have given the Kurds a country. They have 50 million people. They're over in Turkey, they're in Syria, there's spots of them in Iran, so we should have given them that northern territory. We did not give that to them. So they've been living in those areas, and they've been persecuted for a long, long time. So when ISIS came along, they aligned with America, they became our allies, and they pushed ISIS out. Now the reason they did that is because they want their own land. They had a reason for doing it. American helped them push it out. They helped us. They have 10,000 ISIS refugees in a refugee camp about 20 miles in from the Turkish border. Erdogan hates the Turks that hate the Kurds. They hate them with a passion that's been thousands of years. They hate them. So when we pulled them out, Erdogan, our ally, also the Kurds, our ally, went in with his troops and wants to claim a 20-mile radius. He's been killing civilians. So the backlash came to President Trump. When I first heard it, I thought, well, it's not really good that Trump did that, because I'm going to tell you the good things he does, and I'm going to tell you things that I don't think are good. But then the more I thought about it, and the more I saw it, the more I realized that we shouldn't be the policemen of the world. I mean, we are, and he said something that was absolutely, probably one of the most brilliant things I've heard him, and the most emotional things he's ever said. He said one of the reasons, he hates war, by the way, and one of the reasons he said, the worst thing I have to do as a president, I'm almost quoting him, he says, is not going through an impeachment process. That's nothing compared to me writing letters to parents who have lost a son or a daughter in the military. He said, I wrote 5 of them last week, He said, and it tore me up every one I wrote. He says, then I go to the Air Force Base where the bodies are coming back in a big C-130 transport. And the parents thank me for being there. Oh, Mr. President, thank you so much, the grieving parents. He says, they're fine. They look like they have it all together. And then they open that big door, and I'm quoting him, and they start bringing out the bodies in coffins, and these parents start screaming and jumping on the coffins. And he says, I've never seen anything like it, and it tears my heart out. And I thought, you know what? That's a valid point. It's a valid point. Our wars, and then he said something that no other president has ever said, Democratic or Republican at all. He said the industrial military complex doesn't want war to stop. The industrial military complex is the United States that builds all the guns. They build all the tanks. They build all the weaponry. Well, they are so far into politics, it's not even funny. They have lobbyists that are unbelievable. So they want war, but you know they want war for money, for greed. And they don't count the cost of somebody who loses their life. So I was really proud of President Trump when he did that. Of course, CNN bashed him, but that doesn't matter. See, he can brush his teeth and they're going to bash him, you know that. And so it's still something, they did it for a little cycle and then they stopped. Again, Russia loves it because Russia would love to get the Kurds out of there because the Kurds don't like Bashar al-Assad. And Russia, I mean, this is such a quagmire. And Russia is backing Bashar al-Assad, who, by the way, and I'm talking a lot because I'm the one teaching. But he, for Bashar al-Assad, because Bashar al-Assad is an Alawite Muslim. He's not a Sunni and he's not a Shia. He's a minority. And so he doesn't have a lot of power in Syria. So he needs someone like Russia. And obviously Russia has a reason. They want that Golan Heights and they want to get in. So we're watching a lot of players in there and it's fitting up, it's lining up with prophecy. And I'll be honest, I've been studying prophecy for decades and I've never seen anything line up like it's lining right now. Speaking of prophecy, let me give you another one. Italy willing to join European Military Intervention Initiative. So the European Union, the EEC used to be called, the Common Market when it first started, is a conglomeration of European nations that got together. They dropped their borders. You could pass through their borders without any passports. You can use the euro, so it's one currency to go from Italy to Germany to used to be, well, Great Britain until they pull out, to any one of those European countries. Well, the Bible talks about a 10-nation confederacy. Most people thought it was the European Union. We know that the late great Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey talked about the revived Roman Empire, the European Common Union. It actually started, the treaty started in Rome to form that union. Well, it quickly went to 28 nations, so it doesn't fit the bill of 10-nation confederacy. But the Bible talks about them in Armageddon. They're going to be there in Armageddon, the revived Roman Empire, and they're going to be there with a military. Well, they have never had a military. This says Italy is willing to join a European military intervention initiative. What that means is, and by the way, the one who's heading it up is Emmanuel Macron from France. He's meeting in Rome, of all places, and he's bringing some of the nations together. They have 7 so far that are saying we're willing to give personnel to a European Union military. It's not the nations, 10 nations, it may be 10 powers that are giving them to have a standing army. So again, that is something probably missed by a whole lot of people that are looking at prophecy, but it is extremely important when we talk about Revelation and talk about that military that's going to be there. All right, you still with me tonight? Good. So let me give you this one. Let's go to the planet. Things are happening on the planet. The Bible talks about in Romans that the planet is groaning to be delivered. This comes out this week. Bee die-off in the Amazon. This is not like the bee die-off, like hive deterioration where bees die, they fly off and they're gone. Listen, The Guardian reports dire news from Brazil, noting that beekeepers have lost over half a trillion honeybees in only 3 months. For many, the die-off brings to mind colony collapse. However, the standard symptoms of colony collapse are not evident with the Brazilian die-off. Normally, with colony collapse, bees just disappear from their hives, as I said. In Brazil, bees are dying on the spot. Since the start of the year, Brazil has quickly brought to market almost 300 new products, mostly pesticides, some of which are known to be lethal to bees and are tightly regulated or banned in other nations. In fact, many experts believe the massive die-off of bees is likely linked to pesticides. And these chemicals could be killing more than just domesticated honeybees grown by professional beekeepers. Bees are needed to pollinate roughly 1/3 of all food on the planet cultivated for human consumption. Crops cannot propagate without without the assistance of bees. The Bible notes that in our day, quote, the whole creation groans and labors with pains to be delivered. That's Romans 8:22. Yet Bible prophecies also reveal that the creation itself will also be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. It's verse 21 of Romans 8. How we are handling our environment reminds us that the humanity may, in fact, many ways, be contributing to its own destruction through lack of foresight and wisdom. But God makes it plain that it is our sins that will ultimately bring devastating punishment on our food production and our environment. You can look up Leviticus 28:19 for that, and Hosea 4:1-3. So when human beings fail to obey their Creator, even the creation will suffer. Which brings me to something that's not related, but we've been hearing it over and over again. There is no such thing as climate warming by human means. Our climate is warming. It has nothing to do with humans. It has to do with solar flares. It has to do with the solar maximum. Now they don't even say climate warming. They now call it climate change. Somebody needs to study their history. Our climate has changed for thousands of years. Whenever the sun goes into solar maximum, every 11 years, the climate changes. If you want to prove that, locusts only are hatched every 11 years on the cycle of the sun. Solar minimum, the sun doesn't have as much rays to us and we're not as warm as we are. Solar maximum, we warm up. If you look at pictures of the 1700s of the Thames River in London, you'll find that it's frozen over. It's never frozen over since then. It was a climate cold spot that came. The sun was in a minimum. So listen to these two articles, not related, but I related them. So it says, the religion of climate change and new doomsday scenario. When I came to faith 19 years ago, I'm talking about myself, drug using, 19-year-old, not 19 years ago. I was hardly 19 years ago. I was a drug-using, hippie, rocked-out teen. I was told that Jesus was returning very soon. The end of the world was very, very near. And by the way, it's closer now than it ever has been. But that was the scenario, and I was excited about it because it was a scenario. But today, there's a new religious narrative, especially among young people, with a new end of the world scenario. But this one is depressing, and it's grim, with nothing redemptive about it. So it's the new religion of man-made global warming. It has unique gods like Mother Earth, Gaia. It defies the created world with seminarians confessing to plants in a chapel service. I showed you that last week. Praying to plants to forgive us. Okay? It has high priests and religious leaders, the climate change gurus and radical environmentalists. It has patron saints like Sweden's Greta Thunberg, who's been prompted to do that. And it has its own doomsday scenario. The end of the world is near, very near. According to a recent Rasmussen poll, 29% of all American voters believe it is at least somewhat likely that the earth will become uninhabitable and humanity will be wiped out in the next 15 years due to climate change. Let me go on record right now. That's utterly, totally, and completely ridiculous. That is ridiculous to even think that. Nuclear proliferation maybe will wipe us out. Meteoric strike, possibly. It's more probable that Jesus is going to come back. Let me just tell you this. There's a dramatic difference by age on this question. 52% of voters under 35, millennials, believe it's at least somewhat likely humanity will be wiped out in the next 10 years. The survey revealed rural Americans do not share city folks' concern. And the reason why, just look at the voting. The ones who voted Democratic in the last election, and several elections, are from cities. The ones who are in the rural areas of America voted Republican. So the effect on environmental activists are having on our culture, especially the younger generation, is absolutely unbelievable. And this is really interesting when you listen to it. An Australian website offers counsel to help people, especially young people, deal with the stress and anxiety related to climate change. So let me think how much stress I have about climate change. None. Okay, listen. It notes that there are lots of reasons why young people might feel stressed about climate change. Here's the reasons. 1, they feel like planning for the future is hopeless. They are angry that people around them aren't doing anything to help. 3, they're frustrated that there's nothing they can do now to change things. 4, they're worried about whether it's responsible to have children. Can you imagine? 5, they feel like everything is out of their control. So May 2nd headline in Science News for Students states this, quote, climate change poses mental health risks to children and teens. A September 19th article on conservation.com warned that, quote, ignoring young people's climate change fears is a recipe for anxiety. In fact, as far back as 2016, the American Psychological Association, APA, claimed that climate change is threatening mental health. But here's the rub. It's not climate change that's threatening mental health. It's the apocalyptic way it's being reported that's threatening mental health. Everybody's telling them the world's going to end. Well, if somebody told you since day one the world's going to end, I guess you're going to have some mental problems. Listen, after all, when I was told in 1974 that Jesus was coming back soon, it was an exciting prospect. The end of the age is fast approaching, and we will be with the Lord forever. That's what I felt. This world is falling apart, but God will come to redeem us. But it's not because of climate change. They have not gotten even one prediction correct. They do have a perfect record, though, of 41 wrong predictions. It's including Al Gore, who told us in 1986 that the world was only have 15 more years to be inhabited. 1986, 15, 1997. I think we're still here since 1997. In other words, on at least 41 occasions, these so-called experts have predicted some terrible environmental catastrophe was imminent, and it never happened. That's the end of this article, but it leads me to another one I found this week, and this is directly from the mouths of 500 top scientists in the world. It says this. It says, and I'm going to go right to it. I'm going to skip the rest of that. It says this: there is no climate emergency. Hundreds of scientists and engineers tell the United Nations. It's reported as fact, again, since Al Gore pushed it in his bogus climate movie on Inconvenient Truth. I think he was an inconvenient politician. Lost amid the coverage of Swedish teen activist Greta Thunberg at last week's UN Global Summit, where 500 international scientists, engineers, and other stakeholders sounding a very, very different message. They said there is no climate emergency. The European Climate Declaration, spearheaded by the Amsterdam-based Climate Intelligence Foundation, described the leading climate models as unfit and urged the UN to pursue a climate policy based on sound science. I'm quoting, current climate policies pointless and grievously undermine the economic system. They're killing our economy because they're trying to take everything out of it. I went to a lunch today with someone, and they gave us paper straws. He had a Coke, and after the Coke, he got his paper straw. He wanted another Coke. He said, I can't use this other Coke because my paper straw won't let me suck anything out of the glass. Paper straws are not going to save our planet. It's not going to happen. Okay, let me go. This is ridiculous. It says also it's killed our reliable energy. They're killing energy because they think that it's producing something that's going to hurt our planet. There were professionals. The September 23rd letter was signed by professionals from 23 countries. Most of the signers hail from Europe, but there were also scientists from the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and South America. And you know who spoke about this and told us this happened? Wolf Blitzer. No one told us about this. No one said anything about scientists debunking the climate problem. So I'm telling you, there's a bunch of liberal lies that are trying to be shoved down our throat, and you need to be honest and open to it. And so to answer that person that wrote to me saying it's not biblical, it's political, it's both. We know what the Bible says, and we know that politicians are lying to us tooth and nail. Somebody say amen. All right, still send those letters. One last one. You ready? One last one. This one is amazing. So there's a mint that is putting out a penny, copper penny, that has Ocasio-Cortez's, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's picture on the front, and on the back it says 0 cents. Listen to this. Critics of Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez would say that the phrase means a freebie with the freshman congressman. But some very savvy internet users took things a step further and have made the idea a reality. Pictures of Ocasio-Cortez's new collectible coin by AIZICS Mint, AIZICS, quickly went viral. They're minting these things. The coin has a term 0 cents on the back, and Ocasio's face, where former President Abraham Lincoln normally appears in the front. It quickly became one of the top sellers in the individual collectible coin section of Amazon.com. Number 3, as high as number 3. The advertisement said this penny is less than a penny, has no cents, and offers nothing. And I want to add a line to it, and can be used to purchase socialistic items on eBay. So that is our news for the night. I'm going to ask the ushers if they come forward. I love that. I'm ready to get my copy of it. I'm only going to keep it on the reverse side, though. I don't want to see the other side. All right.